Eventually, she did appear where I guessed she would, on the outer edge of the crowd within my line of sight, but I didn't get to see her entire body before she came up around the fountain. I smiled and addressed her as she drew near me. "You took the same detour as me. What a great nose. You must have been a bloodhound in another life, an Arab bloodhound." She stopped and stood over the table, laughing with her head thrown back, the same way she had laughed at her hair joke yesterday. Today she wore a snow-white drop-waist dress with bright print pattern of scarlet tulip buds and a pair of flat-thong sandals. That was all she wore, along with an agate neck ring and a dusty green buckskin pouch slung over her shoulder. She was ravishing, and it took all my pride and willpower to refrain from looking at her too directly, to deny her spell-pounding power over me in those painful first seconds I tried to remain in playful, casual verbal intercourse with her. And I was also thinking of the coming rainstorm, of what was to become of our walk in the garden, as if calling it off now would make her vanish into thin air. Unlike me, however, Annaelle did not appear to be concerned about any of those somber considerations. She sat down and leaned across the table and started matching wits with me, staring straight into my eyes with a frown of mock toughness. "I guess you know what they say about where all roads lead. I walked up to your building thinking maybe I'd run into you, found the square too crowded and skirted altogether, detouring towards the fountain instead. Exactly like you, mister. Annaelle and I did not go back to last night. We just sat there and watched the fountain, had our croissants in the café au lait, talked fitfully about orchids. The sky kept rumbling with remote but tangible threatening thunder. I was quite worried about the impending rainstorm and at some point told her so. I hate to interrupt our cozy lounge here, but we probably need to run along, don't you think, before it starts pouring, you know." She said, "I wouldn't worry about that at all. Actually, it's good luck to walk in the rain. Didn't you know? It's cleansing, spiritually cleansing. I love doing it in the summer." I just looked at her, without any particular expression on my face. She returned my gaze and spoke again, blushing a little. "What? Are you actually concerned about us walking in the rain? It's very warm and muggy, and it would actually do us a lot of good." She did not say afraid, and her words did not sound at all like a challenge. "It is good luck," she added with a smile that meant to reassure me. I smiled in return and told her, "One thing I know, I did a lot of swimming under the rain in Tunisia, and I can testify that it's a lot of fun. In the summer, of course. But I never tried walking in the rain. It looks like I'm going to find out soon enough, though." Eventually, we stood up and left Papa's. We skirted the square and the market crowd altogether and walked in the direction of the Rue Grassoux. Long before we got to the alley, though, the thick clouds ripped open all at once and the rain came pouring down. Rue Grassoux was not in sight yet, and we were already soaked wet. Annaelle put her hand on my elbow. The street suddenly began to appear eerily deserted, and she must have mistaken my Tunisian prejudice against walking in the rain for the lack of resolve or discouragement. In fact, I was very much in the mood for experimentation and certainly not discouraged. It was also hot, and the rain felt warm and rather pleasant in this sultry weather. And there was Annaelle's touch, of course, the heedless power that touch given me as we plunged forward through the thread curtains of rain, an act of pure poetry, perhaps a way of telling me in the end the grave and purposeful judgment of those who had decided to desert the streets did not matter in the eyes of two people embarked on a poetic journey to Orchid Land. In a matter of minutes, the sidewalks were churning and sizzling with jumping craters of white foam as the rain kept coming down in huge drops. Runoff already flowing down the middle of the slanted street in thin sheets like liquid glass. The driving deluge was falling hard against the awnings of the shops and the cafes, the deserted doorways of townhouses, the parked cars and empty alleys, bearing down on the city in thick sheets that whipped the slate roofs in rows of updraft and long spectral wisps of spray. By the time we got to the Rue Grassoux, Annaelle's dress was soaked through, sticking to her slender frame like a blood-smeared sheet. Her hair was slicked back in one straight tassel down the nape of her neck. I ran and took shelter under one of the porches, and she followed me. My need to look at her was physically unendurable, to take all of her magical presence into me, like a long breath of fresh morning air, a hungry drag of starshine and memories. As we stood in the temporary shelter, with the water sloshing and rippling down the cobblestone streets, I noticed that her breasts were not as small as I had imagined. I just could not help it. Trying not to think of last night's rejection, I laid my hand on her hair, ran the tip of my finger through it. It was soft as silk. "Annaelle," I said. She gave me a wry smile. "I know, the curls are pure artifice. What did you expect? Conditioner and elbow grease. All it takes is a bit of rain and poof, back to the old straight hair. Your basic European hair. Your hair is gorgeous, Annaelle, like everything else about you. You look like a real nymph with your hair like this. Compliments again? She still had the ironic smile on her face. Rainwater dripped from her chin, and she looked marbled cold even though her face was flushed. Sorry, I said. I just couldn't help it. Never mind. On a more practical note, I believe we have a mission to carry out, right? Or are we just going to hang out here? Annaelle's face was once again undergone one of those sudden shifts as she spoke. Annaelle, I said, you're soaked all over, and... Tariq, dear, do you want us to stop here? We've come halfway already. I'm feeling great, and we're not cold. This rain is actually a blessing in the suffocating heat, don't you think? She did not say quit, but this time her words did not sound like a dare. And that was when it happened. Something in me just opened up at once, and I lost all hesitation. I was ready to take the plunge. You're on, I said to her. Show me how fast you can run. We both dashed out into the rain, and starting from that moment, the sensory world became a shifting mosaic of fleeting perceptions without depth or material substance. Flying impressions whizzing by on either side of us like fragments from a blurry film, all the way to the winter garden. When we entered the Jardin de Plantes, we slowed down a bit as we ran up the rise toward the winter garden. She asked me to wait. She wanted to take off her sandals. My thong notches are killing me, she said. Farther downhill by the rotunda, the dark tangle of magnolia grove shook like heavy drapery as the pounding rain ripped and lashed in the canopy, lifting up from the treetops in long gray plumes of spray. We ran up the ramp and dashed through the west door into the mossy, humid warmth of the winter garden. For all I knew, the place was completely deserted. She kept on running, eventually settling into an easy jog, and I just followed her, past the first pot and planters of orchids, neatly arranged on long, age-old tables that looked like workbenches and butcher counters. Farther to the right, behind the usual row of potted tropical plants, the rain rapped at the oblong bluish glass panels of the greenhouse, with the water coming down from the eaves like chunks of icicles. I said, not without irony, "Is this how it's supposed to be?" She stopped for an instant with the face half turned towards me. Her cheeks were flushed, pink, but her eyes looked ice-cold and driven. What is? She asked me, sounding impatient, almost disappointed. I mean the tour. Are we going to run through the show like this? I must have sounded rude or whiny to her ears, because she went right back to jogging. Yes, the first time around, yes. Annaelle's dress flapped around her hips and thighs with a wet sound. She kept going, and I went on running close behind her. We rushed past the tropical pond towards the south wing of the greenhouse. Then we came to a skywalk, and she stopped. This is so beautiful, I gasped. Come, she said. Let's get up there. It does get better. The skywalk started with a banistered spiral staircase of galvanized steel. From where I stood, I could see at the top of the stair a circular structure made of teak planting that looked like a small garden deck or the terrace of a treehouse. From the bottom of the staircase all the way up and around the deck, the skywalk was festooned with lush tropical vines, and on the deck surface, lined up side by side against the glistening leafy curtain of the vines, there was round pots overflowing with creeping orchids artfully draped over the deep green leaves behind them, their sensuous, bright petals bursting with color.